the same. They just come in different shapes and sizes. Usually when someone chooses to quit smoking, this is probably the most 3 popular ones.
And what is that?
Well, for example, this is probably our most basic kit. It's a little over 300 mAh in battery life, and it's a basic battery, meaning that you just charge the battery separately, and then you have the tank that holds the e-juice. Now, this tank, all the tanks have a tiny heating element inside, so it's there's this wick here that sucks up the e-juice. It's wrapped around cantho wire at a certain resistance. So this battery will output a voltage, and when you turn on the battery, it heats up the coil. Then when you inhale, it vaporizes the e-juice. So if you think about that, that's what's happening. That's what all of this is doing. Then we come into the different functionalities of the battery. So for example, this battery is double the battery life. That's why it's bigger, 650 mAh, and it's called a pass-through. And it's doing the same thing as this guy, but with this guy you can charge it from the bottom and you can charge it from the top. So it allows you to vape and charge at the same time.
And you can use it with, just kind of a standard cable that you would use to charge a phone or whatever?
Exactly. So we give us different chargers for each battery. And then if you go into this, now we have the basic, we have the pass-through, and we have variable voltage. So instead of outputting about 3.7 volts every time you vape, this guy you can adjust the heat that's going to that cantho wire, so you can go all the way up to 4.8 volts. And so
essentially you're adjusting the amount of heat
that's going to the heating element. So the lower the voltage, the less vapor. The higher the voltage, the more vapor. Now, I can show you the actual tank, and each tank kind of works a little differently, and that's why this almost becomes more of a hobby than people that were going to use to quit smoking. So then you have, this is the actual heating element, the coil. You can see the tiny wicks in there. Each of these, the cantho wire outputs a resistance, ohms. So if you have it at a low resistance, that means you probably don't want to vape it any higher, or else you'll burn out your coil. So then we have different charts that we give customers to show you where you want your resistance to be. Now these are the most beginner, what the most of the population uses. It's easy. You have the tank that holds a lot of juice, so you don't have to fill it as much. And then you replace the heating element every 2 weeks to a month or so. The more advanced users end up switching to variable voltage that is digital. So this is the iTaste 2, 3. This one's not charged, but you can change the voltage digitally through here. This one a lot of people use because it has an output, so you can stick any USB and charge a phone from it. This thing actually charges my phone faster than my wall outlet does. Oh,
so that apparatus actually charges your phone?
Oh, it charges anything, so you just put output on, put the USB in, charge whatever you want.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, so that's why people like this. It's kind of a bulkier type battery, so it's usually someone comes in, they're looking for this type. Now, then we come into the mods, and let me grab one more mod.
We also have juice cards, so it's very loyalty programs, so from that, it'll track how many juices you buy.
So I have 3 different mods here, the VAMO, the EVIC, and a mechanical mod.
What do you mean by mod?
Mod stands for modification. So the battery is actually inside the mod. So you can put whatever 18650 or 18350 battery inside of the mod. From there, so if I turn it on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it brings up a digital screen. So that way now I can vape on volts or vape on wattage, and it's just a different way of reading the heat. And then remember what I told you about the resistance, the ohms? This mod is actually able to detect what the resistance is in the tank. And then if I hold the left button down, it's just gonna tell me what my battery life is at. So I have 3.8 volts left in this battery. Probably 3.6, I wanna get it back to a charge. The differences between these two is the EVIC is more of an intelligent vapor. So you can adjust it. It shows you your power. You can set it in different settings. You can update the software with this on your computer. So yeah, this is probably the most gadgety, but for someone who is into just the simplicity of the e-cig, checking the resistance, checking the battery life, it's usually the VAMO that everyone has. The reason why, for example, is like this tank here is called a, so if you wanted to get deeper into it and try out a ton of flavors, build your own heating element, the coil there, you step into RDAs, rebuildable dripping atomizers, and that's what this is. So what I would do is fill up the juice, or build a coil, wet the wick, and then vape on it. Now, the reason why I'd want something like a VAM or an EVIC is because I want to read where I built my ohms at, so I know where to vape it. So that's that. Now, at our shop, you can individually buy the cantho wire, you could buy the wick. If you didn't want to use wick and you wanted to use mesh, you could purchase mesh. And so, now, like for example, the mods have a computer chip in it, so it won't fire anything less than, let's say, 1.2 ohms. Each battery is a little different. Some are 1.5 ohms. Now, the less resistance, the more vapor you'll get. So what people are trying to achieve, and it kind of turns into more of a hobby, is they're trying to build a resistance that's as low as possible, so when they fire, you get just clouds of vapor. Now these guys, if I built a resistance that was 0.6 or 0.8, it's not going to fire, so it won't work. And that's where this mechanical mod comes in. All it does is it has a 510 threading, which all of our e-cig, it's the most universal type threading. And what I do is I can put any size battery in here. It has a brass screw there for the connection and then a spring here. And so all it is just it's a mechanical mod. There's no computer chip. I push the button, it fires the battery, it fires it to my heating element. So if I do want to build a resistance that's super low, then I can do that with a mechanical mod. And that's kind of where the e-cig game is going. Building all of your own coils in different ways, using different material, and that's the fun part about it. And you can kind of take a look. Some of our mod stuff is right there, like the wick, the different size wick. People are rebuilding their own coils inside of here, and it's optional. You don't have to go that in depth. You can definitely do something very similar, but the type of voltage, the type of resistance, the type of battery you're using will not only customize the vapor production, but the flavoring, so you can really kind of get it to where you want it to be and personalize it just for yourself.
So the variables are voltage, and how does voltage affect the experience? How does resistance affect the experience?
Yeah. So example, like if for what I'm vaping on now, let's see. Let's read the resistance. 2.3 ohms. So for me, I like to vape. I like to have a really cool vape. So I probably can go as far as 4.1 or 4.2 volts, but I'll switch down.
Volts. The more volts, the more heat.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. And like the coil will only handle so much heat, and so that's why you need to be able to know what your resistance is, so you know where to play with the voltage.
Your resistance, your own body resistance, or no?
What's in that heating element, the coil, because the coil is going to output.
You don't want to burn it out.
Exactly. Okay. Yep. And so, like for me, I could probably with the 2.3 ohms. Let me grab the exact chart. Exactly.
Just to let the juices absorb into the mix. All right, things you're rolling up.
Okay, so like we have these charts, you could take this with you too. So if my resistance reads 2.3, it's pretty much 2.2. To safely vape, I can vape at 9 watts or 4.5 volts.
The resistance refers to how much resistance the coil has.
Exactly.
And based on that, you know how many, the voltage setting?
Yep, voltage or wattage. And wattage is just a different way of reading it. It's volts times volts divided by the resistance.
That's just to make sure you don't burn out your hardware.
Exactly. Okay. And so now I have all this room to play. I have between 3 and 4.5 volts to see where my sweet spot is with the juice, how much vapor production I'm gonna get.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And so why are some one thing I don't understand is that some of the devices are fairly sophisticated. They have sort of simple computer capabilities.
Yeah.
Why?
Like for example,
what does that get you?
In my household, I use this. My boyfriend uses this.
Okay. And explain the relative appeal of each one.
Okay, so for example, for me, I want to have it do the basics. I want it to read the resistance, my battery life, show me voltage and wattage, and that's what the Vamo does. This guy will do the same exact thing, but this guy has all these different options you can do. You can set it to an automatic mode, so when you push the button, it fires for 5 seconds. You can have it, you can show you your name, the date. So it just has more things. You can put in your computer and track your vaping trends.
Oh, really?
Which
How do you do that?
this will not do. We have a huge user manual, and you can definitely read it. Okay. But yeah, so I'm not really interested.
So it's like a vaping Fitbit, essentially?
Yeah, sort of. I don't know what that is, but yes.
It's like the iPhone 5.
Like the iPhone 5, yeah.
Okay.
I still have the original iPhone, and my boyfriend has the iPhone 5, so that makes sense. But personally, like, I could tell Sam, the Vamo vapes, I've tried it myself. I've used the same battery, same tank, same battery life in both of these, and I feel the Vamo hits better.
Yeah.
Other people can argue differently, so it's all preference, and that's why there's so many different options.
Because the Vamo actually has like 2 settings, like 2 modes of like output.
This one right here?
Yep. It has 2 modes of outputting energy, and one of the modes does a different calculation from the other. One is more precise, and one's more of a rough estimate. So like in your V2 and my V2, we can switch between mode number 1 and mode number 2, and the amplitude, I forget what the equation is, something like amp squared divided by some equation.
Volts squared divided
by resistance.
Which gives you watts.
Exactly. So it's just like you can hear the difference in like one of them. You can hear that kind of pulsating. Whereas like with this one, you don't hear it as much. I think this one uses a different estimate.
And what is that sound that I'm hearing?
That's the liquid being vaporized. That's
Liquid being vaporized. Okay, interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So do me a favor. We had a little noise before. I was just wondering if we could like take it from the top again.
Okay.
Could you sort of, I've came in here and I have no idea what an e-cigarette is. Just explain the basic concepts to me. You were starting with these simple ones here.
Yeah. So you have a battery here. When you turn it on, it heats up a tiny heating element inside the tank. So if you look in the tank, you have wicks here that suck up the e-juice, and it's wrapped around Kanthal wire that then when you inhale it vaporizes the e-juice. Now all of these will do the same exact thing, but the batteries have different functionality. So this, for example, is a basic battery. To charge it, you would have to take the tank off, and you can see it has 510 threading inside there. You would screw the USB charger right in there and charge it.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yep. Now this functionality is called a pass-through. So it's the same exact thing, double the battery life. You can get it in different sizes. You can charge it from the top, but why it's called a pass-through is because you can charge and vape at the same time. So the USB can go here.
Oh, interesting. So you have a mini USB port.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then when we go into, we call these all Ego style batteries, and then we have variable voltage. Do you want me to get a different one with a color that's easier to see the numbers?
Sure.
Okay. So if you look at this guy, and this one starts at 3.3 volts, and you have that red marker to show you where your voltage is going to set, then you can change it this way. These are all Ego style batteries, and then these guys are all mods, so you can change everything digitally.
When you say mods, what do you mean by that?
Mod stands for modification. So pretty much this guy is very similar to this one because you can't take the battery out, but you can change the voltage. This one you can change it digitally with this screen.
Oh, neat.
And then it has an output to show you, so you can charge whatever you'd like in there. You can charge the e-cig, or you can stick a USB and essentially charge your iPhone or whatever you have.
Can you vape and charge your iPhone at the same time?
You can actually. This is like the best thing when traveling.
Why is that?
Because, like, for example, my phone died on the airplane. Just used my e-cig. I didn't vape on the plane. I'm not the Rosa Parks of vaping on a plane, but I can definitely charge my phone.
So if you're traveling, you have a combo vaping apparatus and phone charger.
Yeah, exactly it.
Oh, interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's the only reason why I don't use this every single day is because I like to be able to read the resistance, and that's what these mods will do.
Okay, so when you say read the resistance, what do you mean by that?
So if, for example, on this guy, it has 3 different buttons. And so if I hold the left button, the computer chip in there reads the resistance, and that's the ohm symbol there, so 2.3 ohms. And so that way I know exactly where I can play with the wattage, and I'll hold both buttons down to bring me to my display menu here.
So the resistance essentially says, you know, how far the heating coil can go, and based on that, you know how much voltage you can apply.
Yeah, and so now I switched it to watts, so it's just going to give me a little more precise vapor or heat. It's just a different way of reading it.
Okay. So it just kind of, it tells you what the device is doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so these guys aren't going to do that, but it's just more simplified. Not everybody wants to be able to read the resistance. This guy outputs 3.7 volts, which would work with almost every type of heating element. You fill up the juice, you push the button down and inhale. That's what this guy's going to do. But if you really want to get into customizing it yourself, that's where the mod world gets into.
Okay, and what's the appeal of this one right here?
This is the EVIC.
Okay.
And that guy offers you it just offers you a ton of more different adjustments for it. So you can set it in automatic mode. It shows you the battery life. You can show the resistance, the voltage, the watt, all on one screen. And it's a 1 button. So if someone doesn't like to have 3 buttons, it just has a 1 button with the control.
So these guys are only $3 more than the regular.
So it just controls with the scroll. So it's just a different way of vaping.
Technology.
And that's showing you the volts there? Oh, interesting. So explain to me, how do higher or lower voltage levels affect the experience?
Yeah, so pretty much the lower the voltage and the lower the resistance, you're gonna get a cooler vape because it's less power, less heat going to the heating element. But you probably would get a lot more vapor production because you don't have to pull as hard to get the vapor. And everybody has their own way of tweaking everything, and that's where it turns into a hobby because you're pretty much customizing it, the vapor, to be however you want. Like, for example, my flavors that I vape on all day, like we call it all day vape, is Imperial Tea and Jade Slush. So it's a really mellow type flavor. So
You're talking about the juice now? Okay.
Yeah, and so like if I do like cinnamon flavors, I will do it a lot warmer. That's just my preference. Like I'll vape it at a hotter heat. So everything is everything is, you can control it however you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a really basic question. When you're vaping, what do you derive from it? Is it the taste of the juice? Is it the nicotine kick? What are the pleasurable benefits?
Well, for someone like me, I was a smoker, so I got into this because I was quitting smoking. Now it's kind of different at this point. Right now, I'm in the morning. I do have to vape on nicotine, but when it gets closer to the evening and I'm just messing with my tanks, building different coils, I'll vape on 0. And I'll see that a lot. People come in here to get rebuildables, they'll get a 0 level of nicotine and a higher level of nicotine, just because when they're playing around, they don't really need it for the nicotine, they just need it for whatever they're working on.
So you might want to vape for the nicotine, but you might want to vape
For the hobby, for the flavor, for the vapor production. I mean, we're gonna have an employee event tonight. We're all going to my mom's house, and we're gonna have a vapor trick competition.
A vapor what?
Tricks.
Tricks?
Yeah, so like, it's just for fun, you know. We're gonna be doing different like vapor fun stuff and teach each other how to rebuild different ways. What did you learn recently, or you know?
So just the physical act of vaping itself is just kind of a fun thing to do?
Yeah, totally.
Why is that exactly? You're just kind of playing with the smoke?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the vapor, it's not smoke.
I'm sorry, vapor, yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, so I mean, like, we have customers here that use it just solely to quit smoking, and that's why they choose only this style, and they stick with this style for years. Then for me, I don't have any batteries this size anymore because this is all I can't. It's like, if you get something good, why do, you know what I mean? Like,
Sure. So in your case, you said you're a former smoker?
Yes.
So you still occasionally want the nicotine aspect?
I still do. I mean, I've only quit smoking since November, and I did it for almost 10 years. So yeah, I still crave the nicotine. I don't vape on nicotine or e-juice with high levels anymore. It's fairly low. At this point, it's like, I'm not gonna drink coffee that's decaf. It's kind of similar. Like, I like to vape with a little nicotine, but when I'm doing hobby stuff like rebuilding, I'll most generally vape on zero.
Okay. And again, and I'm just asking some very basic questions here. It's partly the nicotine. In some cases, it's the flavor of the juice, and there are many flavors.
Yes, we have a ton of flavors, many different vendors, different, and like, for example, the nicotine or the e-juice will have a lot to do with rebuilding and stuff. So like, some people, there's the basics in e-juice is propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, nicotine, and food flavoring. So some people want a lesser of PG than VGs because it will create different types of vapor for you. So yeah, it's so nitpicky, and people get really choosy in what they're vaping on because they...
You used the word rebuilding and you lost me. What do you mean by that?
Okay, like this guy is a rebuildable dripping atomizer.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So dripping does not have a tank like these guys. So what I would do is drip a few drops of juice and then vaporize it. And rebuildable part is because you're rebuilding the wick here, or the canthal wire wrapped around this wick every time.
So the wick is an expendable, and you have to put another wick in?
Yeah, so this will burn out, the heating element will burn out, or if you want to change flavors, I can rebuild this at whatever resistance I want and then vaporize it from
So
there.
essentially you're building the whole apparatus from scratch?
Exactly.
Depending on various specifications?
Yes, and the people who are doing this type of rebuilding is pretty much doing it more for hobby.
And when you rebuild and then proceed to vape, how long does that rebuilt situation last before you have to do it again?
If I was using it every day, probably 2 weeks to a month. But to be honest with you, I rebuild it quite often more because I want to experiment with something else or try a new flavor, or it's not necessarily meant to work like this. These guys, where it's supposed to last you, you put a ton of juice in there, you vape, you push the button, you vaporize
And
it.
just do it forever, yeah.
And do it forever. This guy is just more for like hobby. Yeah.
And when you're rebuilding, what are some of the variables that sort of alter the experience?
So you can use, you can have different style and size canthal wire, which is what's in here.
Which is what absorbs the juice?
This is what conducts the electricity, the
I
voltage.
see. I see.
And then you can have different style ways of collecting the juice. So you can use wick, you can use mesh. There's people who are using cotton. So there's all these different ways. You can rebuild the coils in different styles. There's all different types of RBAs or rebuildable dripping atomizers. Like, for example, this one has a tank attached to it. Different posts.
So you don't have to drip it in because it already has a supply.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's so many different ways of doing it. This one is a little beat up because.
And this rebuilt thing here, every time you vape, you just have to add a little bit of
exactly
of juice.
juice.
Okay, interesting. This is really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have an
Yeah.
e-cig?
I had
You
no
can
idea.
have this one. This one's broken.
I had no idea.
If you want to just dig into how it's built,
Sure.
you can have it. Careful though, it's broken.
So what? I'm just kind of curious. If you go to Super America and they're selling this blue thing.
Yeah.
Is that just kind of? Is that not something you would recommend? Is just kind of too
No.
crude or?
We carry disposable ones that look just like e-cigs because people come in and that's all they want. But we try to explain to them.
But it doesn't
Yeah,
have to look like a cigarette.
No, it doesn't. It will create the vapor, but it's not going to create the vapor that's going to match a cigarette. And that's kind of why people tend to use a bigger battery like this. This output's about 3.7 volts. That's going to give you enough power to feel like a cigarette smoke. If you use something like this, it's not going to satisfy your craving because it's not going to output as much voltage. It's not going to give you the vapor production that a cigarette smoke
So
would
you need
do.
a higher voltage to roughly equal the experience of smoking a cigarette, but obviously without the health detriment. But you need a higher voltage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and so like those ones that are from Blue, they're pre-packed with the juice, so you don't get to choose your juice. You don't know exactly what they're putting in there, if it's 60/40 PG, VG, or some of them say like high, medium, and low. It doesn't tell you the exact milligram of nicotine in it. So that's why we don't recommend those. That's why we don't sell those. Our shop is to get people to quit smoking comfortably and for you to be able to choose what you want to vape on.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So is the form factor of using something like this in the form of a cigarette, is that sort of a temporary thing until people sort of get more comfortable with the concept and?
Yeah, like this
Yeah.
is the exact setup I use to quit smoking. I used this for probably 4 months.
I'm sorry,
then-
you use that to quit smoking?
Yeah, this is the exact setup. I used a pass-through battery, 650. Used a bottom coil tank. At one point, I was just like, "What else? What else is there? What else can I try?" And then that's I opened up the business, and we have different options.
Interesting.
Yep.
And so you were a smoker and you wanted to quit smoking. Help me understand just a little better how this helped you do that. How did it help you do that?
Before here, I worked at a software company. I worked in a cube, and we had our routines. We met up for a smoking break in the morning. We met up for a smoking break after lunch. Maybe before we had to leave, we went for a smoking break. And then I would smoke on the way home, and then smoke after dinner. And
That's a lot of smoking, yeah.
That is a lot of smoking, right? And now, one of the girls that I used to take smoking breaks with came in with an e-cig very similar to this, a little more different.
Okay.
And I was like, what the? Because it looked like smoking, and
It does, yeah.
Yeah, and she was like, "It's an e-cigarette. I was like, where can I get one? I want to get one." I drove all the way to Maplewood for my first e-cig.
For the other store that's in?
No, because this
Okay.
was before even I opened the shops.
Okay.
I was like, "Where'd you get this?" She's like, "I got it at a tobacco shop." He had 2 options for me. He didn't know how to use it. I was just like, "I don't care. I want to quit smoking," so I just bought it. And then I'm actually from California. I went to go visit family, and they have all just e-cig vapor stores. And I was like, we need this here in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, because there were some in like far, far away. But live in Minneapolis. I do very similar to you. I commute by bike or car, walk. Don't like to drive too far. So I was like, you know what, we're going to do this. We're going to do this here in the Twin Cities. We're going to do it right. And this is what it's involved into, and it's.
And explain to me, you personally, the process.
Yeah, so
how did you sort of wean yourself from
Well, I did it
cigarettes
very
to this?
differently.
Okay.
Once I upgraded to something more like this that felt more like a cigarette, some people, they can just pick up a vapor e-cig and be done. Quit smoking forever. For me, it wasn't that easy. I had my pack of cigarettes and my vape pen next to each other. If I needed a cigarette, I smoked a cigarette. No big deal. Smoked a cigarette. Usually it was in the morning because I'm cranky in the morning.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. But then eventually I quit buying the packs, and
The cigarette packs?
Yep, and I just only solely vaped, and my cravings went down. I used less nicotine, but vaped the same amount. So I still continued with my habit. So like in the morning, at lunch, before work, after dinner, and it ended up just working. I didn't miss the cigarettes. I was still using it the same way that I was smoking, and now I'm more into the hobby side of it, which is having different mods, rebuilding it, using different style tanks to play with different type of vapor production.
And what is mods again?
Mods, it's pretty much, a mod is, it holds the battery, modification.
Okay.
So there's a battery inside here.
The tip here is replaceable.
This one's a little harder. And then this here is the mod, and this is the battery.
Oh, I see. The
Yep.
mod, it being the casing. Okay.
Exactly. And then this guy, I can't take out the battery. It's one certain battery. It's all connected together.
So you can put different kinds of batteries onto the casing, which is the mod.
Exactly.
Oh, got it. Okay. It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And so how many different kinds of juices are there? Almost infinite, or?
I mean, what we carry 4 different vendors, and it's, at this point, we're probably at 40 plus flavors. And we're always changing them, so the flavors that don't sell, we'll discontinue them, add new ones in.
And who are these vendors and where do the juices come from?
If you want to, PB Dragon is a local company. He sells e-juice across the country. His flavors are top flavors, and everybody in Minnesota loves local, so they love his product regardless too. And then we have our friends from Cali that we have e-juice. It is vapor.
What is Cali? California?
California.
Yeah.
And then we carry a lot of their flavors. Liqua is an Italian brand where we get most of our tobacco flavors from. Usually when someone starts vaping, they start with a tobacco flavor, just so it's similar to what their cigarette was, and then they transition to a flavor they like because they realize that, for one, they might not need the nicotine and they just want to vape on something that tastes good, or they just find that they just like the different flavors.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
This is really interesting stuff.
Yeah.